Afternoon all. Okay, I know I said I wouldn't, but just one more game from Balm at his peak rating, because actually I think this is instructive as well for Sicilian defence players in how to handle an H-pawn attack, a very early H-pawn attack. So after E4, you might be interested in playing Sicilian defence, fighting defence. Okay, now white might surprise you with knight C3, and you might logically think you'll get a comfortable system, you know, with G6, bishop G7, ID4 later. So you play G6, but you're rudely interrupted now with your plans, because white in this blitz game is an international master, garbaranza, and he plays his H-pawn, and he's got a very high rating for the ICC auto pairing. But this is Balm as black, and we're going to learn from Balm how to handle this. So, first of all, is there a need to play H5 to block the pawn? I think we'll turn on an engine here and look at various defensive ideas, because you might be faced with this in blitz and want to know how to handle it and why, and alternatives. If we played H5, I think we're really weakening G5. White's advantage is quite good here. I hope you can see these engine lines. I'll put that up a bit. So let's just look at it from a scientific point of view as well. Okay, I wonder if I can get the board a bit bigger. Nope. If we can get the board there, but the recording area, okay, you're only seeing 2 lines, which is a shame. Okay, I wonder if I can get a bit more. Okay, you can almost see the 3 lines. Okay, so H5 is a small advantage for white. So what black played here actually was knight F6, which I'm not sure is actually one of the strongest moves actually. It's quite provocative, knight F6, quite cheeky. In fact, probably a safe way is either knight C6 or bishop G7. Why would you want to provoke E5? Okay, but this is what Balm played anyway, knight F6. So, E5 is being provoked as well as H5. In a variation with H5 now though, the knight F6 does have an advantage. You can take apparently and then fianchetto the knight back to G7. This might be stronger than knight F6 here, because here knight F6, E5, and white is getting a lead in development here, and maybe a small advantage. It's got semi-open H-file pressure, so maybe this is not the right way to handle this early H-pawn attack. So this is handling it via a sort of Alekhine defense type move, knight F6. It's a bit of a risky concept, but let's go with it. So E5, and actually we want to move the knight to H5. Now there's a serious risk in some variations of G4. Okay, but white plays D4 here, and Balm actually just takes on D4 because he's undermining the white centre. This E5 pawn is slightly vulnerable, and black's going to gain an important tempo now on the queen with knight C6. The queen goes to E4, but now faced with this G4 threat, remember this is the only pigeonhole to go back with the knight. It's actually blocked now. A very nice technical move by Balm with bishop G7, so not minding inviting G4 where there's no retreat back to G7, but bishop G7 puts more pressure on the centre, so this central control battle is being, quite viciously fought. Okay, but what of G4? We're going to see that G4 not only creates, it's a pawn move, and what is the weakness of the last move? Some pieces are a bit more vulnerable, but how would this rook ever be exploitable as a vulnerable loose piece? Maybe on this diagonal. Just bear that in mind, that this rook might be vulnerable later for G4. Also, potentially, F4 is slightly weakened, the centre slightly weakened. So how does Balm react here? Actually, let's move that a little bit like that. I think that's a bit better. Okay, how does Balm react here? Okay, he reacts energetically in the centre by playing D5, G2. Then we can play knight B4, hitting C2. And now after bishop D3, queen A5. So even though the knight's in pre here, there's no time because of D4 and knight D3, believe it or not. And if bishop D2 here, instead of taking knight, bishop D2, there's a fantastic resource here, believe it or not. If I give you well, you might be able to spot it from the analysis. Knight f4, and this saves black in this line. Knight f4 here. There's astonishing resources, really. So not giving that retreating pigeonhole, and with this, you know, these tactical variations behind the scenes. So takes, now d4 would save black. This is actually better for black. So this is really finding the fine hairs in the variations, where black's better. White's centre has been undermined. e5 is loose, so black stands better. So let's go back there. So a very provocative idea here of bishop g7. So where g4 d5. So let's look at another idea. Queen takes d5. There's simply bishop takes g4. No threat to the knight. So that's simple enough. Knight takes d5. Bishop takes g4. Decoying the queen away from d5. So this is much better for black. Remember, e5 is really weak. So this is starting to justify the sort of Alekhine defense type move, knight f6. If we go back, so knight f6. So this is what happened with, now after g4 being played, d5. Okay, so white took on d6 because there's a pin on the e pawn. Surely the king's still here in the centre. Okay. Knight f6, the knight now retreats because the pawn is no longer attacking f6. The knight can retreat, and now white is going to lose g4, but first he can take on e7, and black now plays queen d6. So there's a loose pawn on g4. So black at the moment temporarily is 2 pawns down. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 3, 5. He's 2 pawns down, but now only 1 pawn down. And look at black's pieces. They're really wonderfully working as a team. Look at black's central control. This bishop on the diagonal is fantastic. There's a loose rook here still. Remember, this avenue to the rook. So that g4 did rupture a bit white's position. Okay, now white moves another piece in your opening again, which is a rule-breaking move. But there is a sort of justifiable logic that the king's in the centre, surely. But here, in fact, if knight takes e3, well, that's one thing to consider. Knight takes d6, what happens? Actually, let's look. Knight takes e3. This is much better for white after the check, because then knight takes c8, and then bishop takes e3, and white's a little bit better, actually. Okay, because white is a piece up there, and if we go back though, what black played now was this very, very clever check, actually, with queen b4 check. So he's bypassing this knight takes d6 check, okay, and white now plays plays queen d2. If we have a look at bishop d2, there's actually knight takes e3 better for black here. Doesn't matter if knight c7 check's played or bishop takes b4. You could take on c2, then knight takes b4 here, and this is much better for black. Knight d6 is harmless here. So this queen b4 is a bit of a killer check, actually. And if c3, same thing really, knight takes e3. So the queen interposes, but now we have that weakness creeping in, that this rook is loose. So finally g4 is really shown up. But white now puts the queen back on the e file, which means that it's actually indirectly supporting this pawn, and you would think that knight d6 check is going to be really dangerous, but Balm has no fear. He had no fear yesterday as he reached his peak rating. He just took the rook on h1, positively inviting knight d6. So his king is going on a roller coaster ride now in this position. So knight d6 check. So he plays king d7, e8 queening. He takes, and now the white queen took on e8. If knight takes e8, it's not much use actually, because of knight d4. And look at black's centre and all the threats like queen g1, knight c2s. It's a bit hopeless here for white. There isn't really anything particularly useful. Say queen d2. Let's have a look at one disaster. Just king takes e8, and look at all of black's pieces. Really aggressive pieces here. just ready to spring into action. Look at all of White's pieces, just still on the first rank, and White is an international master. So look at this difference in piece quality. It's amazing, these variations now. So actually the IM took on E8, so king takes D6, but now you might think, hang on, isn't the black king in danger? White can also try and castle queenside. So and now the move king c5 is giving us the most accurate, but bishop e5 sort of a level tie here. Bishop e5 was actually chosen by balm, inviting castles with check, and now actually the king went to c5, which actually is better than going to c7 apparently, because if king c7 there's queen takes f7 as this shows, and okay, it's not as good as king c5. So actually king c5 was chosen, and now bishop e3 check, and you might think, okay, is the worst able, but black can take that bishop now, and he munches again on g1, because actually it's not just munching on g1, he's going to play queen takes e3 check, and then potentially threaten bishop takes b2, winning the queen actually if the rook interposed, but queen takes f7 was played. Now check, and here things start to get pointed, are soon going to be pointed rather, at the white king. But first, king b6, very nice move, king b6, and the king's quite safe actually on b6 here. The IM tries bishop g2, but now he's actually getting slaughtered after bishop f5. It's really slaughter time, because look, we've got that rook coming as well to coordinate an attack on c2. Queen c4 was played. Now queen c5 eyeing c2 as well as repelling the white queen. Queen e2, and now rook d8, one of the strongest moves, but knight d4 is actually much stronger. Actually it became like a forced mate when I looked at this earlier, but actually the second, like one of the second best moves was chosen, rook d8, and after bishop takes c6, a wonderful finishing move. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, I hope you didn't cheat by looking over here. Queen takes c2 check, forced mate. So it could end, white resigned here, but it could end with queen takes and then rook takes d1 mate. So what a fantastic refutation of the dreaded blitz h-pawn attack with an Alekhine defense like move knight f6. Who would have thought that black has loads of resources here and the knight can almost risk getting trapped? You can even cover up the pigeonhole of black's square g7, can even be covered up for the sake of fighting for the central squares and to get very good pieces. So actually bishop g7 was played here, blocking the knight, tempting for g4. How many of us would be tempted to try and win the knight here? But this is really punished with d5. Huge punishment, underlining many weaknesses in the white position after e takes. Now the knight can retreat back, so temporarily 2 pawns up, but only going to be 1 pawn here up, and a completely really destroyed position. And look at the activity of all of black's pieces, and white's pieces are still sitting at base. You know, they haven't moved except for this knight, which now moves twice. But now this check is actually absolutely lethal, because of course the white queen was attacked there, and there was a reliance on knight takes d6 check. So that reliance of winning the black queen with check was removed with this queen b4. Queen c3, there's bishop c3, so there's not much actually white can do here. It's a pretty horrendous position. So basically he's offering up his rook. He offers up his rook on h1 to try and get this seemingly dangerous knight d6 check in, but it's proved that black can go on a bit of a roller coaster ride with his king, and it doesn't matter if it ends up now on b6. So a very exciting game, but it's just amazing how accurate really the black play is. So queen c5, okay, and now knight d4 would be the most accurate here, but rook d8 was chosen, And now we get this lovely mate in 2 with queen takes c2 check. So anyway, I think there's something instructive in that game anyway. These are spin-off videos from the Blitz yesterday, but no more balm. That's enough for me on balm, I assure you. That's enough. So comments or questions on YouTube, and I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks very much.